where I think, everybody experiences it from time to time.
Sure.
I mean, it just is. And then a couple's got to figure out how to deal with that. We had to deal with that.
A lot of people, it's very common for a wife to have a higher sex drive, but it's still more common that it's the husband more often that does. But I think we want to make sure that we're conveying that it's super normal either way, and that these issues are very common both ways.
And there may be seasons where, there's not any distractions, and sex life is great for both of you. But then you may go into another season where something changes, and and you have to make some adjustments again.
Mismatched sex drive is a very common issue that couples face in marriage, and it leads to frustration, tension, and conflict. So today, Dr. Kim is going to share how he counsels couples in this situation. Sex is one of those things, it's always on the top of the lists of issues that couples face. So today, we're going to equip you to address this aspect of it head on so that you can find healthy and effective ways to handle it together. So, Dr. Kim, how often are couples mismatched in terms of their sex drive, and how often are they doing a good job of talking about that?
I think there's a lot of mismatch at times like that. I think, and sometimes it can depend on the season they're in. But I think at some time or another, people are going to experience that. Maybe the first part of marriage, when it could be that you feel like, oh man, we're both on the same page all the time with that, and then maybe something happens, child, those kind of things. But some research I looked at said that between 10 and 20% of couples will deal with that at any given time. And so it's you're not alone. It doesn't happen to everybody all the time. But I think just in most couples, I don't know I've ever had a couple that said their sex drive was exactly the same. There's always that difference. And so then I think you've got that, just some of the male-female stuff that goes into it. And then you get stress, or you get health issues, or you get medication side effects, that people have had to deal with that. Kids, that's where a lot of people say that's where it changed. Our sex life was great until our first child was born, and then everything changed. Aging, just in where you are emotionally, where the relationship is, all of those can affect your libido. But as far as are they doing a good job talking about it? I don't think couples do a very good job about it. I think it's still a challenge for a lot of couples to talk about their sex life. Usually in counseling, we talk about sex life probably more than anything now, but most of the couples, as I help them learn to talk about that, have really not done it well. And so if you've got, and I think what happens a lot of time with the mismatched sex drive, it ends up in frustration or a fight or, something that does something negative to the big picture of their marriage.
Yeah. I think that's definitely a factor, because it's more than just the act of sex. It's the way you talk about it. It's what it means to you. It's what you derive from it. It's what it does for the relationship. And then all of that rolls into a really difficult conversation.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And if you had a fight about sex the night before, sitting down over coffee the next morning may not be the easiest thing to do to talk about it. And I think a lot of times just because we don't know, and sometimes we don't want to talk to others about it, especially guys. I don't think we're good about that. And so, making time for that and how to do that is really an important step, figuring that out.
Yes. Yeah. So hopefully we can bring some answers to that. But first of all, I'm surprised that your stat is that only 10 to 20% of couples are struggling with it at a given moment.
Yeah, I thought that was the worst I could, or the only one I really could find. But it was significant discrepancies. I probably didn't say that. So, I mean, I think there are, how do they define that?
Sure.
Go back. How do they find what is significant? Where I think, everybody experiences it from time to time.
Sure.
I mean, it just is. And then a couple's got to figure out how to deal with that. We had to deal with that. How do we deal with this? And I think that's where we did some things that helped. One, talking about it was a big help. And two, just kind of, we went through a time where we didn't totally schedule sex, but with kids and their ages and everything else, we kind of had our windows. We knew we'd talk about, okay, these are good opportunities for us. And so we would take advantage. Kids spend the night out. Yeah. I mean, I don't need to go home and take a nap. I can I can do the nap some other time.
Yeah.
You learn to take advantage of opportunities like that. And I
Yes.
think respecting each other's drive,
Mhm.
you know, and I think that's so important. And I think if we're talking about male female, then I think that takes a lot of pressure off the wife
Mhm.
when you do accept that, okay, your drive is less than mine.
Mhm.
It's okay.
Yes.
And not make the wife feel bad about it or that
Yeah.
something's lacking in her because she doesn't have the same sex drive that the husband does,
Sure.
because it's
Yes.
not.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's an important thing. I mean, I'm thinking of so many things right now, like when you talk about how they define the difference and the significant difference. I mean, I think there's such a wide spectrum there where, you could have differences that are not too big of a difference, but it's showing up in a big way because it's become a big point of conflict and a big point of tension. So the issue is magnified. You could have differences that are huge differences in the drive, but it's not that much of a point of conflict. So there's a lot of ways this could be manifesting. And I think it's also really important to point out typically in this conversation, we do refer to the wife having a lower drive because that is typically what you have seen in person for
Yes.
in-person counseling by and large, right?
Yes. But it doesn't always have to be that way.
Absolutely.
I've
Yeah.
had it where the wife had the higher drive,
Mm-hmm.
and that presents an issue too because our culture doesn't usually look at it that way. Our culture looks at
Right.
it like it's usually going to be the guy,
Mm-hmm.
and so then guys got to deal with that, And I've had guys say, "Well, something wrong with me," or
Mm-hmm.
she wants to have sex more than I do, and all that kind of stuff. So again,
Mm-hmm.
you just accept where you are,
Yeah.
and then how do we deal this in the best way that's going to be healthy for each one of us and for our marriage. So our marriage,
Yes.
you don't want your marriage to become stagnant in that area
Mm-hmm.
of the sexual relationship together. We know it's a gift from God. And
Mm-hmm.
so again, it goes back to talking about it,
Mm-hmm.
counseling if that's needed, if you need a third person to kind of
Mm-hmm.
help you kind of figure it out. But there's always an answer
Yes.
with that.
Yeah. And I want to make sure we address that head on early in this episode because since that is, you're speaking from the perspective of an actual counselor who sat in the room with
Yeah.
one couple at a time for 40 plus years. But when people hear the podcast, they're hearing it's a lot of people you'll never meet because it's,
Yeah.
you're in one place. And so on the internet, I think it can be hard to sort of mesh those things together because a lot of people, it's very common for a wife to have a higher sex drive, but it's still more common that it's the husband more often
Yeah.
that does. But I think we want to make sure that we're conveying that it's super normal either way and that these issues are very common both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Also, that we know sex is a gift from God. And so, therefore, the enemy loves to twist it. So, any way he can make us feel like we're weird or isolated, we're the only one with the problem, or that there's no way to fix it, he's going to try to do that. So, I think it's important that we
Right.
recognize head on we're trying to tackle this in a way that's beneficial for marriages because that's the point. We want marriages to thrive in this area. So instead of comparing or feeling weird, let's work to some solutions.
Right. And it goes
Mm-hmm.
back to communication. As you were talking, I thought of a couple that he had always had the higher drive. He got an illness and he had to be on some medication and it affected his libido for, I can't remember how long he had to be on it, maybe a year or something like that. And so they kind of flip flopped in that. And so
Mm.
then the wife, I remember her talking about it, said, I think I know how he feels, how he
Mm.
felt before, because, it was because I guess they couldn't as much and she was taking care of him. They really grew close to this. There was a lot of
Mm.
other kind of intimacy during that time as she came
Mm-hmm.
alongside of him and all those kind of things. And so, yeah. And so, it could even happen, switch even within a marriage situation. The key though goes back, you got to talk about it. You got to say,
Mm-hmm.
how do we handle this? It's not get mad at each other or get
Mm-hmm.
frustrated. It's like, hey, there's an answer here. Let's figure this
Yes.
out.
Yeah. Together. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I've heard some advice in the past. I've heard it taught that if the lower drive spouse should just do it whenever the other spouse wants to, because why not? What do you think about this? Is that true or false?
Well, I think every sex in a relationship should be consensual.
Mm.
And I think so you have to look, is there resentment going on
Mm.
there over time? Is it just, and I don't think, a lot of the sex act for a man is knowing that he can please his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're talking about, say, the wife with a lower sex drive and she's saying just do it and she's not really participating,
Mm-hmm.
I think that affects the whole thing. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
would rather, as a man, I'd rather have sex with someone that wanted to be involved, say, and they only felt like to do that every 2 weeks, once a month, whatever, than to have consistent sex where you're just kind of performing on a body. I don't think guys. I don't think we want to do that. I think we want the interaction. I don't think that was God's design. His design was to connect us and to draw us closer to each other through that. So I think, again, it goes back to communication. Okay, what does work for us? We talk in also marriage university about the different seasons you go through in marriage, and then how do you what's your frequency in that season. And I think sometimes as guys we get afraid. Okay, that first baby comes, we're not having sex very much. Oh my gosh, it's gonna be the way the rest of our life. No,
Right.
you're in a season. Your wife's tired. She's the one who's having to get up and feed the baby in the middle of the night because she's nursing. It will get better. This baby is not going to nurse forever. This baby is going to learn how to sleep through the night. And so it's adjusting to that time and realizing that seasons pass. And there may be seasons where, there's not any distractions, and sex life is great for both of you. But then you may go into another season where something changes and and you have to make some adjustments again. So it's being willing to do that and work with each other about it and not blame each other. So I don't think, if a wife consciously makes the decision, yes, I love my husband. I'm not quite as enthused about this tonight as he is, but I want to do that for him. Well, that's a little bit different than just saying, yeah, just do it. Go hop in bed. I'll be there in a minute. That's just not good.
Yeah. So you're saying, like, if one spouse is just kind of there, but they're not really there, that's not what you want.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to have what sex can be in a marriage.
Yeah. When you brought up a good point too about resentment, because my next question was, what's going to happen over time if they do just kind of go, all right, fine, let's do it.
I think,
what's going to happen?
I think you're solving a short problem in a short term way, but the long term result of that could be devastating, really. If you get resentment, you get emotional distance, or then maybe the spouse begins to see sex as a duty rather than something that draws me closer to my husband and makes our relationship better. I think there's a time in probably the early church period and movement that was kind of, you're only really supposed to have sex to have children.
Yeah.
And, the other part of it, they didn't really talk about, like, I don't think they said you're not supposed to enjoy it, because I don't think that's possible. But I think, but yeah, if you begin to look at it as a duty, or, I read some stuff one time back in England, the Queen's Army, and the women were encouraged to have sex with their husbands to produce offspring that could be in the King's Army. And so you got to, okay, my purpose of sex with my husband is so I can have a male child that can go fight for the Queen. And so I think the different things that have happened in culture over the years have kind of messed with our minds on those things.
Sure.
What is God's real design for sex? Well, procreation is a part of that, but so is enjoyment. Song of Solomon is such a great example of that, as you read through and how they enjoyed their sexual life together as a couple.
That's such a good point, because now I feel like our culture is on the other side of that pendulum swing, where the satisfaction and the pleasure and getting what you want has taken the forefront. So it's almost become that the drive and the satisfaction of the appetite is glorified, and it's sort of the foremost issue. Whereas you're saying in the past, it was like, nope, none of that. Now it's like, no, get what you want. Make sure you're getting what you want. But that really negates a lot of the important purposes for sex and marriage, which is not just about getting our wants and desires satisfied. It's also about the fact that God created sex drive to draw you together. He created your sex life in marriage to protect your marriage. He created it as a form of worship and of building the bond in the marriage. There's all these reasons for it that are, it's not to get what you want, it's to create something between the two of you. And I think when we put those things out of order and we put our desire for satisfaction as the foremost issue, we're always going to end up with a twisted conversation about sex.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's just like you're almost using your spouse, and it's so much selfishness that goes in there. And when you look at the definition of two become one, that doesn't do it. It is the two. We talk about the Hebrew word mingling of souls, dode. I mean, that's really what sex at the way God created it at its best
Mhm.
should be. And you're not going to get that if you're being selfish.
Yeah.
Why even be in a relationship with someone you care about?
Right.
If
Yeah.
that's it, just find you a bunch of people that they don't
Ugh.
even know. Well, that's not good.
Yeah. No. No, not at all. Not at all. Oh, and I think it's really important to sort of dance around, and we're not going deep on this. We don't have time for that. This would be
Yep.
5 podcasts. But it's important to sort of tease out the top of these issues, because I think that sense of pressure and that resentment you mentioned are huge drive killers. When you feel like, that sense of pressure, and in addition, when there's some other stuff under the surface, it's going to make it really hard to talk about this. And so you're going to keep kicking that down the field as long as you can until things get real messy and you have to deal with it.
Right. And yeah, I think, and I think as guys, I mean, Nancy and I've talked about this before. I mean, I think early in marriage, when her drive got less than mine, I used a lot of unhealthy ways to encourage her to have sex or make her feel guilty or, anything like that. And then just realized this is not good. She is not where we had our sex life great early part of marriage, and it's like, okay, I think I'm destroying this.
Yeah.
I think some of the things I'm doing because of my selfishness are affecting us in a much bigger picture than I realized it was. And so we had to talk about it. We had to come up with ideas on frequency and talking about things and what we really wanted out of our sex life.
Yeah.
I mean, we both didn't want just, to be two bodies coming together.
Right.
We wanted much more than that.